Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura and today I am wrapping up 2 readathons that I participated in during the month of October. I will put timestamps down in the box below, so definitely go and check it out if you want to just watch one or the other. The 2 readathons I'm going to talk about today are the Spookathon and the Spooky Reading Challenge. So first I'm going to talk about Spookathon. This one occurred from the 16th to the 22nd. I believe this is the second time it's been hosted, at least it's the second time I've participated. It is hosted and run by Books and Lala, Pages, and Bookerly. All of the information about this readathon, of course, will be down in the box below, so you can check it out if you want to. I'm sure that they'll probably do it again next year. It was a pretty popular readathon. So for this readathon I had a number of books that I was planning on reading, and let's just see how it went. So there were 5 challenges for this readathon. The first was to read a thriller. I had chosen the group book, which was A Stranger in the House by Sherry Lapina. I didn't end up reading this. Just by the end of the time, by the time that I was getting around to it, it actually just didn't appeal to me and I didn't feel like reading it after all. I think, fell into the hype and ended up buying it because I saw it on sale and it looked like it would be a pretty quick read, but it just wasn't something that I'm interested in, and yeah, I don't think that I will be interested in it. I probably will be donating my copy to the library. The next challenge was to read a book with a spooky word in the title, so I ended up choosing Lady Snowblood by Kazuo Koike and Kazuo Kamimura. I only read volume 1, but I would really like to finish reading this. I do have the rest of the series up to 4. So this is essentially the story about the woman here on the cover, who is a lady assassin in sort of the red light district, kind of like the seedy underworld of Japanese Edo period, I think. And she was basically, as an infant, cursed to become her mother's revenge. Her mother was attacked and brutally raped, and so the mother wants to take revenge on these people who did her wrong, obviously, and so curses her daughter to take revenge for her, to kind of become her reincarnated self. She's clever, she is beautiful, she is a strong fighter, she trains hard to become these things. It's really entertaining. It was really brutal. There's a lot of sexual assault and rape and nudity and, blood everywhere. This was originally published in a magazine, which is effectively the equivalent of a Playboy magazine. I think it was even called Playboy, but not associated with Playboy, so it does fit into that context. It was written for men to read alongside pictures of naked women, so there is a lot of, parallels to the magazine that it was published in, so that, plays into what this book is. But I actually really enjoyed it. I had fun reading it. I thought she was a great character. I thought it was well written. I think it's illustrated beautifully. Apart from the violence and the objectification of women in this comic, which makes sense not only in its publication, like it was published in a magazine that objectifies women, but also in its publication as a story that takes place in the red light district, which is basically about the objectification of women, or in many instances at least. It makes sense, at least it did to me. Certainly you would have to take your own stance and opinion on it, but I found it totally entertaining and I really loved it. I know that there are live action films that are based on this, Lady Snowblood films that are published by Criterion Collection, I believe, and I know that this was the series that inspired the Kill Bill franchise, which is probably why it was published with a yellow cover, I'm assuming, or maybe that's why she wears yellow in the movie. I don't know. Yeah, so if that's something that you're interested in, I thought it was pretty good. The next challenge was to read a book based on childhood fear, so I had chosen Outer Space and Valerian by Christine and Mézières. I didn't read this. The next challenge was to read a book with orange on the cover, so I had chosen Orange Volume 2 by Ichigo Takano. I didn't read this. The last challenge was to read a book with a spooky setting, so I ended up picking up And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I did enjoy this. I thought it was pretty fun. I thought it was pretty predictable. I definitely had, basically the entire scenario planned out before it was like maybe 2 or 3 chapters in. I had, my motive and my person and how they did it. You know, there was one thing that I had missed, but, you know, I pretty much had predicted it, so I thought it was pretty predictable, but I don't think that that's the general case. And I think it's mostly because I have watched so much, like, cozy mystery television, that all I was thinking was, how would Murder, She Wrote solve this? So that's pretty much what I was doing, and yeah, she would solve it that way. But yeah, overall, like, it was a pretty good experience. It was a pretty interesting book to read. It was entertaining. It definitely was an easy book to read through, and for the most part I would recommend it. So my spookathon amounted to 2 whole books, Lady Snowblood, Volume 1, and then there were none. So I did end up reading only 2 volumes for the readathon in particular, at least the ones off my TBR, but on the Saturday before the readathon was over was Dewey's 24-hour readathon, which I ended up choosing completely different books for. My sister and I had wrapped up a bunch of our sort of spooky, Halloween-y type books, anything that had monsters or was horror, or had like vampires or werewolves or ghosts or any sort of yokai. We wrapped up all of our, like, I think we had like 80 different titles of monster or Halloween type books, and we wrapped them in paper like a month before this readathon, and then unwrapped them during the day. I ended up unwrapping and reading 15 volumes during that readathon. If you're interested in what I ended up reading or my thoughts on those, I will link up my readathon vlog thing that I had filmed during that day, and you can check it out. Yeah, but it was good, and you know, because I ended up reading 15 books for that, technically for this readathon I ended up reading 17 books, so, you know, overall it's not that bad, but, you know, I only read 2 of the ones that I had planned, which is unfortunate. The next readathon that I participated in was the Spooky Reading Challenge. This one happened from October 23rd to the 28th, so it was just a 5-day readathon. It was hosted by Becky Bookworm and the Restricted section. And there were only 3 challenges for it, but obviously did just as well for this as I did for the last challenge. So the first one was to read a book about a haunting. So I ended up reading Scumbag Loser by Mikoto Yamaguti for this challenge. This is a story about a haunting. It's essentially about this loser here on the cover. He isn't the worst loser in the class. There's a bigger loser in the class, but when the bigger loser in the class announces that he has a girlfriend, he becomes the biggest loser in the class. He, of course, not wanting to be the biggest loser in the class, because that's the worst thing that could possibly happen to him, ends up inventing a girlfriend. She shows up the next day at school, but it turns out that she has actually been dead for years, and nobody knows this except for him. This new girlfriend of his ends up making him a deal and says, you know what, I'll continue to pretend to be your girlfriend, but you need to bring me the biggest losers that you can find, the loserest of losers, and she basically will eat them. I guess is essentially what's happening. So this is a story about this really awful person getting caught up with a monster who is eating people, and not being able to escape, and what's happening to humanity, and he's the only one who knows, and you know, he's has a tough situation, and he has a tough relationships with people, and he has tough memories, and you know, everything is really awful in this, and you don't know how he's going to get out of it. At the same time, you don't necessarily care. He's not a great person. He doesn't really have any redeeming values or redeeming characteristics. It's mostly just, how's he going to get out of it? It's not, do I care so much about him? Or will he make it? Do I care that he'll make it? No, I don't know that I care that he makes it. Like, I don't know that I care about this humanity that's being written in this manga. Not only that, it's just not really very well written. There's a lot of transitions that are quite complicated and missing. You know, there was parts where I had to flip back to a page before, because I was like, when did this happen? When did this character show up? Why is this character here? What are they doing? So I actually found it a little bit confusing, and for this type of manga, I didn't think that it was necessary to be confusing. Like, it is basically just a bloodbath. So the plot should be fairly lean. and the confusion should be fairly minimal, so I didn't think that this was handled very well. Art-wise, I was okay with it. Like, I didn't think it was spectacular or anything, but I wasn't overly enthused with the story itself, so it was just sort of an okay title to me. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, at least not to the majority of readers, and especially not if you're not a manga reader already. But I am glad that I ended up reading it, and it definitely fit within the spooky challenge. The next challenge was to read a book about a monster, and I had chosen Frankenstein, or Kitaro, or I Am a Hero, which are all stories about monsters. I didn't end up reading this challenge, but this is a story about monsters, so this could count. The next challenge, or the last challenge, was to read a horror classic. I had intended to read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Unfortunately, didn't happen, but I did read the Mr. Arashi's Amazing Freak Show by Suehiro Maruo. This is from the genre eroguro, which is erotic grotesque, or, you know, horror, erotic horror manga. There aren't too many of these translated into English as far as I know. I certainly don't know if I've read one before. This was incredibly disturbing and incredibly beautiful. I cannot recommend this to you. I certainly don't want you to read this, but at the same time it was so beautiful. Or some of the bits were incredibly beautiful. This is a story about a 12-year-old girl, you know, big, highlighted, bold, 12 years old girl, and she is essentially taken prisoner by a traveling freak show. She is sort of like their maid or whatever, and there are often times where she's trying to escape from them because this is not an ideal situation. There's horrible things. They are certainly freaks, very base and decrepit type characters, but, you know, as she is sort of attempting her escape, she is severely punished, usually through torture and rape. So this is not something that I recommend anyone read. You know, during the second half, not a very long book, during the second half she ends up meeting a new member to the freak show, an older man, probably in his 40s, who in a way hypnotizes her and convinces her that she's in love with him, and they get married. This is a 12-year-old girl. So taking all of that into mind, and taking all of that as this is incredibly disturbing and horrible, and you shouldn't read it, and I don't recommend it. At the same time, it was fantastical and mind-bending and psychedelic and incredibly beautiful, at least in some illustrations. Even in some of the rape scenes, which I don't necessarily want to see. They are so reminiscent of floating world paintings, ukiyo paintings, just that erotic sensuality of this entire culture of paintings. This feels like a modern repainting or modern take on something that is so incredibly beautiful and idolized, and it is sort of the same tradition. You know, those were the same types of painting, the same types of works illustrating the same types of situations. So this feels like a modern retelling of a culture of art. So to me, incredibly beautiful, incredibly disturbing, don't recommend it. Incredibly beautiful, I really loved it, really hated it, having a hard time with it, not really sure what to do with it. But yeah, don't read it, please. Also, I thought it was beautiful. So I ended up reading 2 manga for that. You know, one large one and one really disturbing one. Well, they're both kind of disturbing, but this one, yeah. So that's it for my Spookathon and Spooky Reading Challenge. I ended up reading 4 books for those, but I also read 15, so 19 in total over the 2 weeks, so that's not too shabby. And they were all spooky titles, so I think that is pretty good. I was actually really enjoying reading all the spooky titles and all of the kind of Halloween and paranormal stuff, which I don't pick a lot, or I don't pick up very often. So I really was enjoying all of this reading, and had a lot of fun doing that. Anyway, if you've read any of these titles, would love to hear your thoughts on them, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.